Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Market Update, where we discuss leading financial and economic developments in Europe, Asia, and North America. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. And first up, we begin in the UK. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government is preparing sweeping changes to the UK's asylum system, seeking to regain political footing after a turbulent period marked by internal dissent and economic strain. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood is set to unveil reforms on Monday, today, aimed at accelerating the removal of migrants with no legal right to remain, including potential overhauls to human rights laws. The move responds to mounting criticism that the Labour government is failing to control irregular migration, a key driver of rising support for Reform UK, an increasing area of public concern. Nearly 40,000 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats this year to date, despite the Prime Minister's promise to break the criminal networks behind such journeys. These crossings topped a recent Ipsos poll of public concerns. Mahmood's package, described as the most extensive asylum reform in modern UK history, includes limiting migrants to one appeal and fast-tracking unsuccessful cases. It would also curb the use of Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, often invoked to avoid deportation on family life grounds, and re-examine interpretation of Article 3, which prohibits inhumane treatment. The government also proposes ending statutory rights to housing and support for asylum seekers, echoing measures tied to Denmark. Refugee stays would no longer be permanent, but subject to periodic review based on home country safety assessments. Yet this toughening posture risks deepening tensions within Labour itself. The party's left wing argues that embracing restrictive policies undermines Britain's humanitarian legacy and follows populist forces like Reform UK to set the agenda. More centrist voices argue that this is simply following what the majority of the country wants and better balances law and order with humanitarian concerns. The issue comes at a fraught time for Starmer, already shaken by accusations that a cabinet member was plotting against him and criticism over Chancellor Rachel Reeves's decision not to raise income tax, a move that unsettled markets and party allies alike. Opposition Conservatives have seized on the moment, promising to exit the European Convention on Human Rights and deport illegal arrivals within a week if elected. Starmer's policy push comes as the UK economy slows. Third quarter GDP grew just 0.1%, down from 0.3% in Q2, with a cyber attack at Jaguar Land Rover dragging down manufacturing. Consumer and business sentiment remained cautious amid fears of tax hikes in the upcoming budget. Economists warn that Reeves's fiscal tightening could further dampen growth, already the weakest in the G7. With public trust wavering and immigration dominating the national debate, Starmer has a balancing trick on his hands while steering an economy struggling to regain momentum. Next up, US President Donald Trump signed an executive order over the weekend to reduce tariffs on a range of imported foods, including beef, tomatoes, coffee, and bananas, a move aimed at curbing rising grocery prices as his administration faces intensifying voter frustration over the cost of living. The tariff exemptions apply to thousands of food commodities that the White House says cannot be produced in sufficient quantities in the United States. Among the items now exempt are avocados, coconuts, nuts, pineapples, coca, and frozen orange juice. The changes are retroactive to November the 13th. The order marks a shift in Trump's approach to trade policy. Critics argue it's a retreat following mounting criticism that his protectionist tariffs have contributed to higher consumer prices. Supporters push back, arguing that it's simply a recalibration based on practical considerations. An unnamed White House official speaking to UK-based Politico described the exemptions as a follow-through on Trump's promise to adjust tariffs as needed while renegotiating trade terms. US Trade Representative Jemison Greer called the decision part of a broader strategy to balance protectionism with economic pragmatism. Quote, "This is a national outgrowth of exactly what the president signaled." End quote. The move likely also is tied to concerns within the GOP after recent elections where Republican candidates struggled in races dominated by economic issues and affordability. The impact will be particularly meaningful for beef and coffee, two markets hit hard by Trump's trade policies. Beef prices have surged as domestic cattle herds shrink, prompting reliance on imports that faced stiff tariffs. Meanwhile, US coffee imports from Brazil, America's top supplier, plummeted after a 50% tariff took effect this summer. Critics argue that partial rollback is too little too late. Quote, "Tariffs have been inflationary. This is an overdue acknowledgement," end quote, said one trade analyst. At the same time, the administration touted new agreements with Argentina, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Ecuador, designed to increase imports of goods not widely produced domestically. The goal: offer consumers relief at checkout and contain political fallout heading into 2026. Now, next up, we have one more development to cover as we move to Asia, but just quickly, if you'd like to continue to be on top of updates like these, how the financial and economic world affects politics and geopolitics around the world, consider subscribing to Market Update, hit the bell notification icon, and you will be. And if you're getting some value from today's episode, don't forget to hit the like button. And finally for today, Japan's economy shrank for the first time in 6 quarters, raising fresh doubts about the Bank of Japan's timeline for monetary tightening and strengthening the case for a large fiscal stimulus package from Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's administration. Preliminary data released today, Monday, showed that real gross domestic product contracted by 0.4% quarter-on-quarter in the July through September period, translating to an annualized decline of 1.8%. Although the contraction was smaller than economists' median estimate of 2.4% slump, it marks a sharp reversal from the 0.6% growth seen in the second quarter and underlies the fragility of the recovery. The downturn was driven mainly by a 9.4% plunge in housing investment, its sharpest drop since the 2009 financial crisis, and a 0.2 percentage point drag from net exports as US tariffs continued to weigh on Japanese shipments. Even with a recent trade agreement signed with the Trump administration, Japanese exporters still face a 15% duty, dampening growth prospects. Consumer spending, which accounts for more than half of GDP, eked out a meager 0.1% rise, reflecting pressures from elevated living costs and stagnant real wages. Meanwhile, private companies boosted capital spending by 1%, a sign that business investment remains resilient despite trade headwinds and labor shortages. The unexpected contraction complicates the Bank of Japan's path to policy normalization. The central bank has maintained its benchmark rate at 0.5% since January, wary of rising borrowing costs amid uncertainty over the impact of US tariffs and domestic policy shifts. Most analysts now expect the Bank of Japan to wait until early 2026 before resuming trade hikes. Quote, "The fall in output last quarter should give the Bank of Japan further pause for thought," end quote, said an analyst at Capital Economics, who believes the Bank of Japan will likely look for signs of a fourth quarter rebound in the Tankan survey and industrial production data before moving forward. The Takaichi government, however, appears increasingly committed to fiscal stimulus. Reports suggest the administration is considering a package worth 17 trillion yen, $110 billion US, with a supplementary budget of around 14 trillion yen, exceeding last year's outlays. Measures will include utility subsidies, rice vouchers, and regional aid to ease the burden of rising prices. Quote, "The contraction will strengthen calls for additional fiscal support," end quote, said economist Takuji Aida. He argued that a Bank of Japan rate hike immediately after the passage of a stimulus package, quote, "would not be logical," end quote, especially with voter sensitivity around inflation and wages top of mind. Financial markets are already responding. Long-term bond yields are inching toward record highs, fueled by concerns that increased government borrowing may undermine fiscal discipline. Yet, as Goldman Sachs strategists note in a report over the weekend, the Bank of Japan's cautious stance and the yen's recent weakness, trading above the 154.55 yen to the dollar level, suggest the pressure on yields could persist. With the Bank of Japan's next policy meeting set for the 18th of December and the government poised to unveil its stimulus plan in the coming weeks, Japan's policymakers have no easy options. They must support growth without triggering fiscal or wider political instability. Okay, that is today's episode of Market Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a good Monday, have a productive week, and I hope to see you for another episode tomorrow.